I'm Dr. David Bernstein. Welcome back to our series, 25 Tips for Working with Modes. Now, in the last couple of videos, we've talked about how to help people to find their strengths and then to inspire them to grab their strengths, to start using their strengths. And today we're going to go a step further because we're going to talk about how to help people to build islands of strength. And that brings us to the topic of today's video, build it. Now, what do I mean by an island of strength? Well, an island of strength is an area of good functioning in somebody's life. So, when our patients come to us for therapy, very often they're struggling. They're not only, struggling with low mood or, other kinds of symptoms, but, they often aren't functioning very well. And if we can help them to develop even a single area of strength, a single island of strength, then, that can become the kind of the solid ground on which they can stand. And from there, they can really raise their game. Just simply, creating a single island of strength can really help people to raise their overall level of functioning. And, that means, eventually improvements in other areas of their life so that, one island of strength can eventually lead to additional islands of strength. So, here you see an image from the cover of my book, Building Strengths in Therapy, and it's a guide to how you can use all four of our iModes tools to help patients to build strengths. And, when patients often see this image, and this is an image from our, Healthy Adult Bow tool, this is the image of Strengths Island. They often see and they go, oh, yeah, this is the place. This is the place where I want to get to in my life. And it looks very inviting and it seems very peaceful and very tranquil. And, they just kind of imagine themselves lying out on the beach and, drinking pina coladas all day long. So now, that's nice to do on holiday, but that's not exactly the idea behind Strengths Island. Strengths Island is a kind of metaphor for a place that you can visit every single day. And it's a place where you can work on your strengths. So if you're on this boat, you sail, on a daily basis to Strengths Island, and it's just a time and a place you create in your life so that you can work on building your strengths. Okay. Now, how does this work in practice? How do we go about, building or creating an island of strength? Now, one important message here is that it's much easier to build one strength at a time than trying to work on building multiple strengths simultaneously. So, when it comes to building an island of strength, what you want to do is together with the patient, think together just about, what is a potential area of strength that you could really lead to some improvements in somebody's life. Where would you like to start? And just start by focusing on one of them. Now, let's take as an example, the case of Ron. This is the patient that we introduced some time ago. And you'll remember that, Ron is somebody who has these repeating fights with his girlfriend. And it's always around the same kinds of issues. He wants to go out with his friends and party, and she doesn't like that. She wants him to stay at home. And he blows up in anger and then feels guilty and either complies with her demands to stay home, but what happens over time is that this cycle just perpetuates itself, and he is frequently going out, staying out too late, and also when he's going out, he's doing some things that are not so healthy. It's not just good clean fun. He's going out and he's drinking too much, and he's smoking some cannabis, and he's staying up way too late. And when, at a certain point, Ron tells us that he really is kind of tired of this, of the way he's leading his life. He's kind of tired of his lifestyle. He recognizes that it's not healthy. And in addition to staying out too late, Ron often sleeps the better part of the day away. He has a job working in a cafe, and that has, variable hours, and oftentimes it means that he can sleep oftentimes into the afternoon, and then he wakes up and he realizes that he has to rush off to work, He often, goes off to work without even eating anything, or he just grabs, something unhealthy, whatever happens to be in the refrigerator, and grabs a bite on his way out. And he recognizes that this is not a healthy cycle for himself. He'd like to be able to take better care of himself. And so, the area that he would like to work on is self-care. He'd actually like to improve his self-care. Now, it's very interesting. That seems on the surface to be a rather different problem than the one that he came in for, right? Which is his relationship with his girlfriend. But in fact, these two things are related to each other. Why is that? Because, escaping from his problems and escaping from his emotions, that is how Ron copes. And if you think about that in terms of modes, which is the topic of this video series, that's the detached self-soother mode, right? That's a, side of himself that tries to cope with his emotional pain, by drinking or using drugs or partying and so on and so forth. And so over time, not only has that led to a deterioration in Ron's, health and well-being, it's also had a really negative impact on his relationship with his girlfriend. And you can imagine that as long as Ron continues with these kinds of unhealthy behaviors, that it's going to make it really hard for him to focus on his connection with his girlfriend. Because in essence, Ron has these attachment difficulties. Probably his girlfriend does too. That's probably what's, at the deeper level of the conflicts that they're having. Both of them have attachment problems. It's causing problems in their relationship. But as long as he continues in this cycle of escape and addiction, he's never really going to be able to make the room in his life to work on his connection with his girlfriend. So maybe this isn't a bad place to start. But on the other hand, you could say, but wait a minute, you told me in an earlier video it's better to start with strengths people already have. But, self-care is not a strength that Ron has. In fact, it's the opposite. It's an area of weakness. And of course, you're right about that. So then how do we handle that? How do we help him to create an island of strength in an area that is relatively weak for him? Well, there is one way to do that. And the way to do that is to use the strengths he already has to help him to build an island of strength in an area that he doesn't have. And what are Ron's strengths? If you think back to it, what we found was that his strengths are in the area of connection, which is kind of funny given the fact that he's not really connecting very well with his girlfriend right now. But nevertheless, he's a guy with a great sense of humor. He has a lot of empathy, a lot of compassion for other people. And so those are his area of strengths. So how can we use Ron's existing strengths? How can we capitalize on those strengths to help him to build an island of strength in the area of self-care, an area that's relatively weak for him? Well, here's how you can do it. Let's take a little bit more of a look at self-care. What is self-care? Self-care means nurturing yourself, taking good care of yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally, and so forth. Now, I often tend to think that, the basis of self-care is developing healthy habits. And here is, something that I created, which I call the healthy habits pyramid. I tend to think that the core of healthy habits lies in three areas, and that is, sleep, diet, and exercise. And what you want to try to do is help people who are having difficulties with self-care start to build an island of strength by focusing on one of these three areas: sleep, diet, or exercise. Now, it turns out that they're all related to each other. And you see this in the case of Ron, right? He has sleep problems, which is caused by the fact that, number one, he stays out too late and sleeps too late. Also, his drinking and his drug use contributes to his sleep problems. The sleep problems are also related to his, poor diet, right? He's not doing that. And he's, instead of going out and doing something healthy to take care of himself, he's engaging in these unhealthy behaviors. So actually, all three of these areas right now are areas of relative weakness that are reinforcing each other in a kind of vicious circle. Well, what you want to do is start with one of these areas and start to build it up so that instead of a vicious circle, you have a virtuous circle. It doesn't really matter where you start. Does it start with sleep, diet, or exercise? You begin with one of these, you start to build it up as the beginning of building an island of strength, and then you gradually build in the other ones, and then they start to positively reinforce each other in a healthy way to create a virtuous circle. And that's how you build an island of strength in the area of self-care. Now, in Ron's case, which of these three areas should we focus on? In principle, you could do any. But, you have to think about, how can we use Ron's strengths, his strengths in the area of connection, to focus on one of these three areas? Now, one way you could do it is say, okay, maybe Ron and his girlfriend can work on some of these areas. Maybe they could go to the gym together and exercise, or cook together, or develop better sleep hygiene together. But the problem is that Ron and his girlfriend are not connecting very well right now. Maybe later on, after you've addressed some of the attachment problems, then you can try to help. Then perhaps you can prescribe the idea that they would work on some of these areas together, but not yet. It's too soon. Because of the attachment difficulties, it's not likely to succeed in Ron's case at this point. So what you want to look at is what's another area in his life where he can use his strengths in the area of his connection to start building better habits. Well, for example, one area is exercise, right? Wouldn't it be great if Ron could do something social that would be in the area of exercise or sport? Because let's say, for example, that Ron can connect with a group of people, whether that's going to the gym or joining a sports club, or something like this. Ron is a very social guy. That would help meet his social needs and use his social strengths in a way that would begin to build an island of strength in Ron's life. And so when we look together with Ron, at his life, and we ask him, in the area of exercise, has he ever exercised before? Does he like to exercise? Well, it turns out that in the past, when he was younger, he used to love to play football. But that's something that, he hasn't done in a number of years. But, when he was out on the football field, he felt very physically fit. It was fun. He enjoyed having teammates because he's such a social guy. And so that could be a place for Ron to start. And so he takes a look and he finds out that indeed, there's a group of guys who get together in the early afternoon, on a regular basis to play football together for an hour. And so that is the beginning of Ron's developing an island of strength in the area of self-care. Well, how does that work? Well, it has a variety of benefits for him. Obviously there's the benefit of being more physically fit. The second benefit is that when you're physically fit and you're getting exercise, it helps you to sleep better. It also motivates you to take better care of yourself, for example, to, as part of your training to start to eat better. Okay, so you start already to get this kind of virtuous circle. And furthermore, Ron has a relatively unstructured life, right? Because he works in a cafe. He has very little structure in his life, and that's to his detriment. But by having a regular time in the week where he goes and plays football, it's the beginning of establishing some routine. Okay, so now it seems, simple, and yet this is a way that you can actually build an island of strength in the area of self-care that can have a variety of benefits for Ron, raise his overall level of functioning. And the way that you do that is by capitalizing on the strengths that he has, which really are social strengths, strengths in the area of connection. Probably if you prescribe that Ron is going to get his exercise at home by running on a treadmill or a exercise bike or whatever, that's not going to work for him. So find the areas of strength that he has, capitalize on them, and use it to build an island of strength, in this case, even in an area that he doesn't have. Okay. Now, next time we're going to go on with this process because, sometimes, of course it's great to, build good habits and, build islands of strength, but, it can seem like a daunting task, particularly when patients come to therapy and they're really stuck in negative patterns and they're demoralized. And so the idea is to start small. And so, to focus on the little things. And that's going to be the topic of our video for next week. It's the little things. And I'd like to invite you to come to our website, www.imodes.com, and take a look at our image-based therapy tools. Have a great week, and see you next time.